What's up guys? It's Art Book Addiction here, and we're here with a new artist journey video. So today we're going to be talking about getting through the bad part of an art piece. Okay, so recently I've been working on a bigger project that's been taking me a longer time. Okay, and I just got through this really big hump. Okay, right, and for a while there, it was like I wasn't really enjoying it. Okay, right, and sometimes during a piece, there are moments where it's just not looking right, and you're like, like maybe in the beginning it was looking good and you were happy with it, and then you kind of got to this awkward phase during a painting, right, or an art piece, right, and you just like, that if you could just get through that part, it might start looking nice, right? But then there's this phase where you just have doubts, and you're like, can I even accomplish this, right? And those are the times where you really need to kind of like hone in and prove that you are an artist and that you can make it through this thing, right? But yeah, that's what we talk about today. But before we start the video, please hit that like, hit that subscribe, check out my prints and Patreon if you want to support the channel. Consider becoming a channel member, and join the Discord. Okay, and with that, let's get into it. Now, the awkward phase in a painting, okay, or an art piece, right? I'm just gonna say painting because, I'm a painter, right? It usually happens, okay, so like you have your line work, right, and it's looking good, you're pretty happy with that, right? This usually happens in the in-between phase between line and render, okay, where you're just blocking things in, right? Things are looking really flat, you know what I mean? It's the awkward phase, the transition between line work and a painting, okay? Yeah, and this is an experience that happens in digital and any form, because like transforming line, which is basically 2D, to giving it mass, which is a little bit more three-dimensional, right? There's gonna be that awkward phase where it's flat and very two-dimensional, while you're trying to give it dimension. You're trying to pull out the dimension from it, right? And the thing is, like, it is an awkward phase, okay? It is the ugly part of an art piece, right? And every art piece has an ugly phase, okay? How quickly you get out of the ugly phase depends on the piece, right? Sometimes a phase will last longer, sometimes it'll last a week, sometimes it'll last just a couple hours, right? Sometimes it'll last like 2 minutes, you know what I mean? Depending on your speed, depending on what you're making, right? But there is always the awkward phase when things are not all together yet, you know what I mean? And they're just like, they're kind of like, you have like a good amount of it, but not all of it, right? And so like, let's say like you have like 70% like kind of blocked in, right? And then you still have 30% to kind of block in, and you're just like, oh, it's just not looking, it's not really getting there, and you're really kind of feeling like oh, and then like, am I able to do this? Is this piece really gonna come out the way I wanted it? Oh man, it was looking so good earlier, right? And now I'm not really enjoying it as much, right? And it started making me think about like what it takes to kind of push through that, you know what I mean? And like, it really sucks when the awkward phase is lasting a long time, right? Well, for this piece right here, it was taking a while to get past that awkward phase, okay? It was getting past that awkward situation, right? And I like, see, the thing is like, and it happens to me, and like, and I've been painting for so long, you know what I mean? And I've gone through it so many times, and yet like this time it was just taking a while, and I'm like, and I'm trying to get the render there. I'm like, I know what I'm doing, and I know the process, but I still have that feeling of like, of doubt, okay? So during the awkward phase of a painting, right, there is that moment where you have the doubt, where you're like, oh my god, can I even do this? Like, do I even know what I'm doing, right? And like, you're making moves, and you're like, oh, it doesn't look right, but you kind of just have to keep like, just kind of keep pushing along, keep kind of just moving along slowly, right? And this, like, especially for a bigger piece, right, it's gonna take a longer time to get there, okay? So it's just, it's so painful and so, like, annoying, and, like, you know, you're just kind of like, oh, I just want to get past this phase, I just want to get past this phase, but and you want to just truck through, but you can't truck through it because it's not, you're not doing it in the correct order, and things will, like, you know, look weird in certain places and then not look right in the other places, and then you just, you know, it's an awkward phase, okay, right? And like I said, every art piece goes through it. The question is, you know, what do you do when you're feeling this way? What do you do when you have these doubts, okay? So for me, okay, with this painting, you know, I was getting the big doubts, okay? This is like the doubts were humongous, okay? Like, sometimes I would, like, just feel like, is this it? Like, is this over? Like, is this gonna be the last piece? You know, is this like, will I give up on this piece and then just give up on the journey? You know what I mean? And, like, you know, that's just a doubt, okay? So a doubt just comes in and just, like, oh, you know, hits you, right? And you get scared, and then you doubt more, and then you get more fearful, and you get, you know what I mean? And then it builds up and spirals out of control, right? And, like, you know, that's what happened to me for this piece, okay, right? And I was feeling so, like, doubtful, I was feeling so fearful, I was like, you know, I just, and, like, you know, like I said, I've been through this so many times, you know what I mean, that I'm like, you just gotta push through, you know this thing, but it's still there, right? It still exists, you know what I mean? And it's the moment, these are the moments where you have to prove that you're a real artist, okay? Like, I was thinking about it, right? And I was thinking, like, well, when are people the most they can be, okay, right? When are people the best they could be? It is often the case that they are the best not when times are at their best, okay? Everyone could be an artist when things are looking good, when, you know, you're happy and you got your piece and it's done, and you have all this work and people are liking it and everything's good, you know what I mean, right? And that's the great times to be an artist or whatever, like a musician or whatever. When things are going good, that's when things, it's easy to be the thing, right? But when it's hard to be the thing, it's when it's going bad, okay? Or when, like, it's just not going right, and you're just having to, like, fight your own mind, your own doubts, your own, like, you know, perceptions of, like, what you can do or not, you know what I mean? And then the piece itself, you know, you're sometimes you're battling the piece, right? Not necessarily battling it, but like just trying to push through this bad phase, right? And it can be tough, man. It can be real tough. Like, I know, like, you know, and I know, right? And, like, all I gotta say is, like, you know, as you get better, it may not be easier, right? You know what I mean? It may not get easier, because if you're doing it right, then you're challenging yourself art-wise. You're always challenging what you can do, what you perceive you can do. You know what I mean? So if you're painting correctly, if you're doing artwork correctly, then you know, and it's not always the case. Sometimes a piece can be easier, sometimes a piece could be harder, right? But you'll hit those pieces that you're like, okay, I want to challenge myself. I really want to do something difficult that I've never done before, right? And those are the times where the awkward phase can last a lot longer, okay? Because you're learning, you're creating new neurons, okay, and synapses to create these connections to get better, you know what I mean? But to get better, you have to suck at something, right? And then, like, you know what I mean? But, like, this is the thing, like, you know, art is so wide and so open, right? That you can be good at one section and be bad at another section, okay? Or you could be already good at the thing, but it just needs time to get there, right? So what I'm trying to tell you is that if you have a piece, okay, it's not going so well, okay, that it's like, you know, but like you believe in it, you know what I mean, you're like, and you like, you really care about it, and you're like, okay, this like, I want to make it happen, okay, that you gotta push through, okay, you have to push through. That's like I said, the bad times are what you really gotta prove your mettle and prove that you're an artist, okay, and that's when you're at your best. Okay, when you're at your worst, or when the piece is at its worst, when your mind is like having to fight for it, you know what I mean? That's when you are a true artist, okay? When the times are bad, when the chips are down, and you make it happen, okay? Right? When is a firefighter at his best? Okay, when he's at his home with his family, everything's going good? No, it's when he's in the middle of a fucking fire and shit's falling all around him and he might die, okay? Right? Obviously, we're not in that scenario, okay? The things that play out, the worst situations that play out are in here, okay? They're in the mind, okay, and on the canvas, right? That is our battlefield. That is where we make the things happen, okay? Right? But unlike, you know, a physical danger or anything like that, there isn't always an obvious solution, right? So it's like, it's more vague. It's like, you know, you're pulling things, you're kind of trying to make things work, and you're like, does it work? And you know, you're like, sometimes you're guessing, you know what I mean? And that's the awkward phase, right? And so here's what helped me, okay? Here's what helped me during these awkward phases, okay? So, you know, obviously you gotta have the mental fortitude to push through, okay? That's just obvious. But on a more practical level, right? Sometimes what you're missing is information, okay? And when I say information, I mean like reference, okay? Sometimes you have something that you made and it's not looking that good, and you're like, oh, and you're like, I wish that thing looked better, right? Like oh, I wish this hand looked better, or I wish this face looked better, okay? And that is when reference is the key, guys, okay? You come in, you pull in the reference, okay? Don't draw from other people's drawings. Don't use other people's drawings as reference. It's not the same, okay? You need to pull up reference that is from real life, okay? And gain inspiration from that and be able to interpret whatever that is into your work, okay? Right? And these, like you know, there are parts where your painting will feel mushy and soft, okay? It's not concrete yet, okay? And you're looking at it, you're like, it's too mushy, it's too soft, it's not looking right, okay? Get reference, okay? Get reference for that thing, okay? You're like oh, like, you know, whatever thing is not looking right, you know, whatever part of the thing is not looking right, get reference for it, okay? Reference will come in and boom, help you out, okay? Right? And sometimes, okay, this is not always the case, okay? You're gonna need to just, like, if a part is just not working, you gotta just redo it. You just gotta, like, find reference, okay? And like, if your thing looks way different from the reference, like, just like, and you feel like the reference looks good and you think it would work for the piece, just redo it, okay? And erase, okay? Or in my case, paint over, okay? I just had to do that yesterday. It's not that, you think that it's gonna be really painful. It's not as painful as you think, okay? Because, you know, you're fixing things, you're making things better, okay? You're like, okay, well, this thing wasn't working before, and now I got to change it, okay? And like, this requires, and like, maybe you've rendered a lot of it, okay? But like, you know, but you know that it's not working right? So if it's not working, you have to just replace it with something new and something better, okay? And making a call like that, okay, that's tough. You know what I mean? That's tough because you put so much work into whatever that was already there. You know what I mean? Right? Like, maybe the head isn't working to what you want, okay? And you want it to like spin the head around to this direction. You know what I mean? And you're like, oh fuck, then I have to repaint this whole thing. And like, you know, it's strange because like the first time you paint it, it takes a longer time. Because you're developing the colors, you're trying to figure out what's working for the piece as a whole, right? The second time you do it, where you redraw it, paint on top, okay, it's going to be a lot easier and it's going to be a lot quicker because you've already figured out the colors you're going to use. You've already figured out like the structure of like what you're doing, you know what I mean, underneath. So the second time it's gonna be way easier, and you're gonna like repaint it, it's gonna be way faster. Okay, like I literally just did this like yesterday, where like the hands on my painting were not looking very good, they weren't looking very hot, you know what I mean? And I was like, I got reference for it, okay, and then I just took that reference and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna do this because I like it, I think it's gonna work good, I think it's gonna look good for the painting. And you know, you're gonna have to like chop away things, and you're like, and then, you know, as I did it, as I was continuing and finishing it and rendering it, right, I was like, wow, what a much better decision that I made. Like, what a great call that I made to do that, right? And like, you know, it was like a mini version of the awkward phase, okay? Because, you know, you have the previous thing, it wasn't looking good, you draw the new thing on top, right? And then I'm going from here to the render like immediately, because I've already blocked in most of the colors. I already know what colors I'm going to use, right? So I've gotten past that awkward phase, like, you know, like for the piece as a whole, you know what I mean? And so like, you know, like now that I figured it out, it just went by so much quicker, so much easier, you know what I mean? And then once it looks good, I was like, that's so, like, that's it right there, right? And like I said, so sometimes you just need reference. Sometimes you just need a place of knowledge from which you can create the piece, right? Sometimes you just need like you know, like, oh, if this thing isn't working, find something online or real life, I don't know, up to you, right? That like you look at it and you're like, this could work for the thing. And it kind of inspires me. Okay, reference is beautiful because it can inspire, right? Reference, like, it's not like whoa, like, you know, like the most divine inspiration. It's just like oh, that looks good. Okay, or like, oh, I think this could work. You know what I mean, right? And sometimes it's not necessarily about making the best piece ever, okay, or making the piece that like oh my god, it has to be 100% all the way through all the time, right? Sometimes it's just getting something down and you're like, okay, that looks right, okay, that looks right, okay, that looks right, okay, that looks right, okay. And then once you build on those things that look right, you know, then you've built yourself a foundation from which things can look beautiful, okay? Because then maybe it just needs a little thing here and you're like, and then boom, dude, it all comes together, right? Another example, so there, you know, during the awkward phase, right, everything looks flat, everything like is not quite put in, right? Or maybe you have like 90% of it put in, you know, everything blocked in, right, appropriately, it's just not rendered yet. There's a point where like it's just looking like really like this, like for this piece, right, there was a moment where it was just looking really flat, okay, and it wasn't working in my eyes, and I was just full of doubt, full of this and that, right? And I was just like, what am I doing with this? Where am I going with this? You know, like I painted it before, and it should look good, but it's not looking good, right? And that's when I decided like there's this one piece that I'm just gonna render to as much as I can, right? I'm gonna render it as much as I can, like for this session, you know what I mean? And then like, you know, once I did that, right, this is something my teacher taught me, right, where it's like you just need to get one piece to like 80-90%, okay, and like once you got that, you're like that looks good, okay, that's solid, okay. Once you got that solid spot, right, then from there it will start bleeding out, because like, you know, like let's say you got like one spot, like for me it was like the gauntlet, right? There was a gauntlet, it wasn't looking right, and like I was like, okay, I'm gonna make that thing look good, okay, because it looked so weird before, okay, so I made it look good, right? And then like afterwards I felt way better, okay, I was like, oh, thank God, okay, like maybe I can do this thing called art, you know what I mean, right? And then once I got that spot going, then, you know, I started working on the things around it. Well, I'm like, if this is gonna look good, then this other thing has to look good around it, okay, then this other thing has to look good, and then from there the goodness from that one spot will bleed out. Okay, not necessarily like, next to each other, but like other parts, and then like it'll start infecting the rest of the painting. Okay, because you want to bring it up to that same level, right? And once you do that, you'll start. It's like, okay, the way I like picture it, it's like, when you're in the awkward zone. Okay, you're climbing a mountain, right? You're climbing, right? You hit the awkward part. Okay, it's dark. You can't see anything. All you can really do is try to feel your way through the climb. Okay, and you're like, I don't even know where I'm going. I don't know if this is the right direction. I don't know if I'm gonna, go to a spot where I won't be able to climb anymore, right? And so you're reaching into the darkness, hoping that you find something, right? And when you render that one spot to that right area, right? That's when you've got a solid handhold. Okay, you're like, oh, I got it, dude. Okay, and you pull yourself up, and then you're out of the darkness. Okay, then you're boom. Now you can see where you're going. You're like, okay, thank God. Now I got it. You know what I mean, right? And it takes grit. It takes strength to get to that moment. Okay, right? Not just as an artist. You know what I mean, but as a person. Okay, because uncertainty, that is the killer of hope. Okay, you know what I mean? Like uncertainty, that's when like things like, oh, I don't know, and it's like, it's okay to not know. It's okay to feel your way through. It's okay to have that awkward phase. Okay, because some people are convinced that like, good art never had like it always just flowed like perfectly out, right? And anybody who draws, anybody who paints knows that that's never true. Every piece has a point where it's not looking that good, where it's not looking that hot, where it's awkward, where you're like, oh fuck, do it, like, what am I gonna do, right? And sometimes, you know what I mean, it might be looking like a clinker. Okay, a clinker is a piece of coal that doesn't burn. Okay, as in it's a piece that just never, that like you try to make it work, it didn't work. Okay, and it's not going to work, right? I've had pieces like that, not too many, because I like to finish what I do. There are pieces that I've made that just like, at the end of the day, I was like, I have to let this go. Okay, right? And that's another thing. When do you know when it's a clinker versus a piece that just needs more time and energy to get where it needs to be? Okay, so here's how I figure that out. Okay, here's how I figure that out. Okay, you figure it out on the canvas. Okay, when you're making a piece and you're rendering it out, or you're making it look, you're trying to get it to the place where you want it to be. Okay, it's like the way I kind of want to phrase it is like I said, it's like concrete. Okay, it's like clay. You know what I mean, right? Clay over time hardens. Okay, and as you're working with it, right, it's like, oh, how workable is the material? How workable is this piece, right? And that applies to paintings as well. You know what I mean, right? Except it's not. It's just, not as easy to ascertain, because there's no hardness to it. You know what I mean? It's just like, whether the thing looks done or not. You know what I mean, right? And when you're working on something and it's in its awkward phase, okay, the workability of it should still be like, it's like, oh, it's still soft, I can still work with this, and once you start painting, once you start working on the thing, you'll be like, oh, okay, this is still like, this is still like wet concrete, it's still not hardened yet, it's still like, workable, I can still kind of like move it around to what I need to be, right? And that's when you should keep pushing with the work and like kind of try to find a way through. Okay, those are the times when you need to do that, right? When it's all hardened, okay, where you're like, it's rendered and it's like, that looks like, that spot looks good, but like, it's just not really working as a whole, and it's like basically all hardened, you know what I mean? It's all finished, right? but it's just not working. You're like, and like, I think those are the times where it might be a clinker. You know what I mean? Where it might like this thing is not gonna ignite. You know what I mean? Right? Like there's nothing, like there is no longer within you a feeling of like this thing might work. This thing I can get it to work. Where you look at it, you're like, this doesn't work. Okay, this doesn't work, and it's hardened where like I can't work it anymore. Okay, and those are the pieces that don't sing. Those are the pieces that like you're just gonna have to go like, okay, well, it's time to cut my losses and just move on. You know what I mean? Right? Though those happen, right, I would say that they should be rare. Okay, they should be rare for you. Okay, right? Depending on the way, like if you're a sketch artist, if you're like a sketchbook person, right, there's gonna be pieces that just you're gonna fly by pieces, something like this one's not gonna work, oh this one works, it's just like the sketch phase, right? But when you're doing like a really rendered piece, when you're doing like a finished piece, an illustration that you want to look good, that you want it to be done, okay, this is where that applies. Okay, because a sketch is always workable, right? Something that's not like pushed that far is always workable, right? I mean, whether you want to work on it or not, that's up to you, right? But like I'm talking about like major pieces that you're working on, that you're really like, you're like, oh, I'm trying to make it work, right? Sometimes it just doesn't work, right? And sometimes it's still workable. It's still like, you're like, no, like this still has plenty of room to happen. Okay, right? So when do you know that? Okay, when do you know that? That's up to you. Okay, right? But like I said, sometimes you gotta push through. Sometimes it's the moment where you're like, okay, this is where I gotta show my grit. This is where I gotta show that I'm the thing. I am the art. You know what I mean, right? And there are times where you look at it and you're like, okay, well, I tried my goddamn best. Okay, I tried everything to make this thing work. Okay, it's hardened, it's solidified. There's no putting more material on it. It's putting more is just gonna make it look worse, right? And that's when you gotta just say like, hey, this is a clinker, it's not working, I gotta throw it out. Okay, you know what I mean? Or just like, it's like, this is a piece that's just not gonna work, right? But I implore you guys, in most cases, it is the former, okay, not the latter. It is in most cases that people have just not worked something enough, okay, right? Or like it's still workable, and you just kind of gave up on it, right? That is way more common than a piece that is not working and has become overworked, and you've done too much to it, and it's just not gonna, like, you just gotta throw it out at that point, right? And that has to do more with like effort, you know what I mean? But I would say for most pieces, try to get through that awkward phase. Try to push through that awkward phase, and like you'll know if it's still workable the second you start working on it. The second you start laying down shit, you'll feel it in your hands. You'll feel it in the piece. You're like, oh, this is still fine. This is still soft material. I can still work with it, right? Once it gets overworked, then you'll feel it. Then you'll know, okay? But don't let the battle in your mind, okay, determine whether to give it up or not, okay? The piece itself will tell you, okay? Working on it will tell you, okay? So, I encourage you guys, if you're working on an awkward piece, try to push through it, okay? Push through it, make it work, find reference, okay? Find reference to help you find that solid ground, okay? You know what I mean? Use information to help inform what you're trying to do, okay? Most of the times, it's just a matter of like, oh, I just needed reference. I was trying to draw it in my head. I didn't know what I was doing, right? And you just needed reference, okay? So, with all that, I think we're gonna end the video here, guys. Please, if you enjoyed the video, hit that like, hit that subscribe. Check out my Prince and Patreon if you want to support the channel. Consider becoming a channel member, and just join the Discord, okay? All that bullshit. And I'll catch you guys on the next one. Thanks a lot. Alright guys, this is for the people who are able to make it through the entire video, right? I'm going to show you the piece. I know most people will never make it through the entire video. This is still a work in progress, right? But you can see the results of pushing through, okay? Right? Sometimes a piece just needs that little bit more time, a little bit more effort to get it where you need it to be. Right, look at that. Yeah. And now I'm really happy with it. And, you know, it just took a little bit of extra time to get it where it needed to be, right? So, little reward for people who push through, all right? All right, thanks a lot, guys.